Welcome to Thneedville, a bright place where seasonal maintenance is required for your trees by screwing on your leaf color of choice. A place where the air you breathe needs to be replenished by a machine sold and delivered on schedule. Thneedville, a place where everyone is smiling, but thirsty eyes are quietly looking for life. At first glance, the Lorax is a bright and whimsical children's movie about recycling and being nice to trees. It gives us cute, adorable creatures to fall in love with, but underneath the plastic grass and choreographed musical numbers is a story about something far less marketable: the cost of not thinking for yourself, speaking up, and taking action. The film sketches a society where individuality is inconvenient, speaking up is ignored, and buying things is easier than caring. The Lorax isn't just asking who will speak for the trees, it's asking, are you willing to do your part and speak up? In the synthetic world of Thneedville, our protagonist, Ted Wiggins, lives a tragically normal life. He goes to school, rides his bike, and crushes on the girl next door. Ted is a teenage boy living in a world he inherited. This is all he's ever known. While his journey starts out with the archaic, almost mundane goal of impressing a girl, it quickly transforms into something bigger. Ted represents a generation cultivated inside the consequences of the choices he never consented to. By centering the story around a teenage boy, the film highlights the innocence of a generation that is stuck with a problem that they did not create. The film quietly passed the weight of the world down to the next generation. In The Giver, Jonas is born into a world that looks calm and even ideal, but slowly realizes that everything is not as it seems. Everything's not black and white. Ted and Jonas can't go back to pretending everything is normal, even though they live in a theoretically perfect world. On the surface, their societies have solved all world problems. Pills to suppress the stirrings, air in a bottle to remain refreshed. But where's the humanity? Thneedville removed nature and autonomy. The community removed emotions and individuality. Ted and Jonas didn't know anything was wrong until suddenly, something that was once normal feels wrong. Ted learned about trees. Jonas saw color. In both films, their worlds depend on people staying comfortable and compliant. The moment someone sees beyond it, the entire illusion becomes fragile. The Lorax tells a profound story where it takes someone special with guts to speak up, like Ted, to spark a revolution. While the consequences of his actions are massive and lead to generational impacts, the film also serves as a reminder that an individual's power isn't always measured by the size of the result. It echoes the sentiment that whatever you do in life will be insignificant, but it's very important that you do it because nobody else will. Ted's choice was monumental, but the restoration of the world ultimately depends on the collective, with even quieter choices made by citizens. It reminds us that while we may not all be the hero who plants the last seed, we each have a unique, insignificant part to play. The daily choices we make are vital to preserve our humanity. If Grandma Norma never told Ted to visit the Once-ler and encourage him to go outside the walls, Ted would not have started his journey. She's the only one who dared whisper the truth in a world of silence. The film's final number, where the citizens of Thneedville join together to sing "Let It Grow," proves that while one person's voice may feel small, the collective choice to stop being compliant is what finally shatters the illusion. Cy, the O'Hare delivery guy, is the first to step forward. His choice to stand up and sing something positive, to not only let the tree grow, but to let their community grow, shifts the entire atmosphere of the city. One person can make a difference. Central to the film's message is the Lorax himself. This goofy neon fluffball is the self-proclaimed speaker of the trees. He represents the fundamental necessity of advocacy, but speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves is a lonely, often unappreciated task because it stands in direct opposition to the seductive power of human manipulation. One of the most vivid yet subtle scenes in the film is when the forest creatures gather around to defend their home from the Once-ler's intrusion. They are ready to act, but their resistance is instantly neutralized by a simple bag of marshmallows. The Once-ler accidentally discovers that by offering a sweet treat, he can induce a trance-like state of compliance. The creatures become so focused on the immediate gratification of the marshmallows that they stop noticing the clutter he's bringing into their forest. They allow him to stay and eventually destroy under the dangerous illusion that how bad can he be, giving them treats? It's only survival of the fittest. This moment is a hauntingly accurate metaphor for how Thneedville functions as a whole. The town has created a literal barrier to ignore the wasteland outside the walls, creating a vacuum where environmental collapse doesn't exist. The city's out of sight, out of mind philosophy is enforced not just by the physical dome, but by a constant stream of high-tech distractions, the marshmallows of a modern world. Whether it's bottled air, disco dancing trees, skiing and sunbathing on top of buildings, or the convenience of a synthetic life, these comforts serve to put the citizens into a similar trance. Like the forest creatures, the people of Thneedville are bribed into silence. They stop questioning the laws of nature and autonomy as long as their immediate desires are met. O'Hare himself tells Ted that this town is filled with lots of fun stuff to catch your small attention span, and he's not wrong. This line reveals that the system is not accidental, but deliberately designed to distract. This is why the film looks fun and whimsical, why the animation style is bright and colorful. The audience, like the townfolk, is momentarily drawn into the spectacle, making the underlying message of this story easier to overlook. The Lorax's advocacy is unappreciated because he is the only one trying to wake everyone from the sugar-coated dream. He knows that a treat is not a substitute for habitat, and that the Once-ler's generosity is actually a form of predatory manipulation. Ultimately, the film suggests that we are at our most vulnerable to exploitation when we are at our most comfortable. The sweetness of the product makes us overlook the cost of the process, proving that a manipulated society is one that has been convinced to trade its future for a marshmallow. The film shows groups that can't speak for themselves, like the plant life, the wildlife, people who aren't born yet, workers who fear retaliation, and the children. The film's deeper question is not, should we protect them? Rather, it asks, what are you willing to sacrifice to speak up? The film presents a profound ethical and moral quandary. The question isn't whether environmentalism and conservation are inherently wrong or right. We're pretty aligned that plants and animals deserve protection, but that the consensus masks the real dilemma. The trade-offs. What are the long-term ethical costs? Who decides what rights trees should have? But most importantly, who's paying for all this? Who's coughing up the time and money? Speaking up for the voiceless often means someone must lose comfort, profit, or convenience. In Thneedville, the cost of advocacy is high. O'Hare would have to risk his fortune. Ted would have to risk his and his family's safety. However, the Once-ler would have to risk everything. He would lose his family, company, and his entrepreneurial identity he worked so hard for if he chose to do the right thing. That's why the Lorax leaves him with a warning. A tree falls the way it leans. Be careful which way you lean. This burden of speaking for the voiceless is not unique to the forest. It is a reoccurring necessity in the face of any systematic injustice. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch is a proxy voice similar to the Lorax. He speaks for the socially silenced. Speaking for Tom Robinson puts a target on his back. He risks his reputation as a lawyer and also risks his and his kids' safety. Both the Lorax and Atticus Finch speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. But where the Lorax confronts a world that doesn't care, Atticus confronts a world that pretends to care. Remember when I said speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves is a lonely, unappreciated task? The Lorax is lonely because he is a ghost of the world that no longer exists. Atticus is lonely because of the absence of moral backbone, not because of the absence of people. The Lorax reveals the danger of ignoring moral truth, while Atticus reveals the danger of systems that distort it. Atticus leans the way he strives to live, no matter the cost. This starts to raise the question, is advocacy simply about changing outcomes? Or is it more about witnessing injustice and doing something about it, even when change feels impossible? The Once-ler is the most compelling character in the film because he doesn't begin as a traditional villain. He starts curious, hopeful, and even likable. A small-town boy exploring the world to make a difference. The film suggests that greed often arrives gradually and disguised. That's what makes him scary. He doesn't wake up one day deciding to become destructive. He just keeps choosing one more until the line disappears. The quiet fallacy of composition that individual actions are too small to matter, even as they accumulate into irreversible consequences. The Once-ler's descent into greed is not immediate. It is slow, subtle, and unsettling. He does not begin with the intention of destroying the forest, but with the desire to create something profitable and successful. That is what makes his corruption so effective. Greed rarely announces itself as greed. Instead, it enters as ambition, productivity, and opportunity. The film blurs the line between commodity and corruption, forcing us to ask where the boundary lies between making a living and exploiting a world. We don't need to buy bottled water in the excessive way we often do, but that same bottled water has also saved countless lives, showing that necessity and excess are not the same. At what point does something useful become excessive? At what point does comfort become complacency? The Once-ler keeps convincing himself that he's simply building a better future. But each tree he cuts reveals how easily a desire for success can harden into moral blindness. His downfall suggests that greed is not always a dramatic fall into evil. Sometimes it is a slow surrender to the idea that taking a little more is never really wrong. Another powerful point in the film is how it humanizes the Once-ler. Yes, he falls into corruption, but he is still given the opportunity for redemption. It's important to note that he does not plant the seed himself because he is deeply bound to the destruction he caused. He can confess, remember, and regret, but he cannot become the future he helped erase. Instead, the film places that responsibility in Ted's hands, suggesting that restoration must come from someone still capable of hope. At the end of the film, the Lorax returns and floats down beside him. No words are exchanged. Only a quiet understanding passes between them. The Once-ler, now aged, worn, and burdened by guilt, meets the Lorax's gaze, and in that moment, both seem to acknowledge that while the past cannot be undone, the future is still unwritten. The film ends with a kind of awakening, not just for the characters, but for the audience as well. The Lorax serves as a call to action. We are not responsible for this world, but we are responsible for what happens next. In a world clouded by anxiety, fear can become a form of silence, a quiet excuse to remain still. But the film urges us to confront that fear, to not be afraid of ourselves, and to act anyway. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better, it's not.